Hello and welcome to episode 420 of the official EstablishToRun.com podcast. My name is Adam Levitan, joined by the men you know and love, Evan Silva and Michael Leone. Evan, how's it going?
It's going great. Ready to talk some RBs.
Leone, good afternoon.
Love talking running back, my favorite position.
On today's show, we are going to talk all things running back, what our strategy should be, who we are targeting, sleepers, busts, etc. By the way, if you have a draft coming up, you are doing yourself a disservice if you're not armed with our draft kit. Silva and I have picked a team of full-blown virgins to adjust every decimal point to make sure our rankings are completely up to date when it is time for you to draft. Also, be sure you are playing on Underdog Fantasy if you want to get ready for your home league. This ridiculous $2 million to first, $1 million to second best ball tournament is still going on. Best way to get ready for your home league and put your knowledge to use. Promo code ETR when you sign up. They will match your first deposit up to $100. Again, promo code ETR at Underdog Fantasy. All right, we are discussing home league setups here. Not best ball, not tight end premium, not big tournaments, straightforward 12-team, half PPR fantasy leagues. And at the running back position, when it's half PPR, Leone might disagree here. When it's half PPR and you only have one flex, which I think is the way a lot of home leagues are set up. Again, half PPR with only one flex. I am fine, more than fine, starting running back. In fact, I actually think running back starts are okay in that setup. Leone, the running back hater, what do you think about optimal running back strategy in this kind of home league setup?
Well, I like your negotiation tactic. You know, you throw out running back, and then you get me to settle on running back being okay. So, but it does depend too a little bit about, are you starting 3 wide receivers in a flex or 2 wide receivers in a flex? If you're starting 2 wide receivers in a flex, it definitely shifts towards running backs having a lot more value with the half PPR format. They don't get beat by the receivers as much as they do in full PPR, and you don't need as many wide receivers as you need. So the scarcity changes a lot. So yeah, I think I want at least one running back early. And the other aspect of this in a lot of home leagues is the wide receiver breakouts that we like go a lot later in home leagues. So you can still get them. You can kind of have the best of both worlds.
Right. So whereas in sharp release, something like, say, DJ Moore goes in round 3, it would not shock me at all if DJ Moore went round 4 or round 5 in a home league. Amon-Ra St. Brown, guys like that, I think will go later. All right, Evan, how are you thinking about running backs this season from kind of a macro perspective? How do you like to set your teams up at running back in home league type setups?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Leone's explanation was really just a long way of saying, wait until the 10th round and take Nyheim Hines and you'll be fine. Is basically what he was saying. But no, I mean, this goes for all positions. This is not a running back specific answer to that question. I mean, I like to set up like my top 25 or so, just my overall top 25, and kind of abide by my own rankings as the top 25 picks go, and then dictate how the rest of my draft is going to go based on who I take in the first, second, and third rounds. I let the first few rounds dictate how the rest of my draft is going to go. And I could do 0 RB. What if I start off with, let's say, Kelsey and then 2 stud receivers? Like I might do 0 RB and not take a running back until like the 7th or 8th. I'm willing to start off with RB times 2 in the first 2 rounds if that's kind of how my top 25 dictates that I should draft, and then I'm probably going to hammer wide receivers after that. So this is not a running back specific answer, but that's just kind of how I like to do it. I mean, I'm doing rankings, like I look at my rankings every day, very oftentimes multiple times per day. So I'm putting a lot of time and effort into that and thinking through, and drafting a lot and testing my rankings. And so that's how I like to do it. I think that people, like anybody, should be able to do that. I mean, you can set up your own top 25, look at our top 300, look at my top 150, whatever, shuffle them however you like them, stick by those top 25 picks or top 30 or whatever, however you like to determine it, and then let that dictate the rest, the way that you draft from that point on.
Let me just put this out there. I think in home league specifically, like we already said, a lot of these wide receiver guys that we like as breakouts are going to go later. So I'm leaning more running back heavy early in home league stuff because, man, if I just hammer wide receiver in rounds 3 through 7, I'm going to be totally fine there. I mean, last year I did a league with my neighbors. I started off RB. I end up with Jamar Chase and Cooper Kupp. I mean, I won the league by like 500 points. They think I'm a genius, right? Like it wasn't that complicated. I was getting these outrageous wide receiver values that were falling to me. So in home leagues, like if I start, say, Dalvin Cook, DeAndre Swift, or if I start CMC, Aaron Jones, Lenny Fournette, like I still think that I compete at the wide receiver position. Whereas in these sharper leagues, it's totally different. And so, I guess what I'm trying to say is that I feel way better about the wide receivers in rounds 3, 4, 5, 6 than I do about the running backs, if that makes sense.
I think that makes a ton of sense. Like, you don't want to get caught in a position where you're taking a running back just because you feel like you have to fill the position. That's where you get in danger mode. That's where you start taking, guys like David Montgomery in round 3 because you feel like you have to, fill the position with guys that have these projectable day one volume, but they're not necessarily the most talented backs. Their offenses are, at risk of not being good. And all of a sudden, that really nice volume day one doesn't mean anything by the end of the season. So if it's a tiebreaker early, it makes a ton of sense to lean the way of running back, just understanding that in those rounds that you mentioned, quite often the better pick in a vacuum is going to be the wide receiver. And sometimes we focus too much on just filling out like our day one starting lineup. We want to be making the best pick and just stockpile as much talent as possible because there's so much chaos going to happen over the course of the NFL season. And the best way to set yourself up for success that only can be to take a running back early. And if we want to start at the top, like CMC, I think should be your top pick overall.
Right, CMC, JT. But really, if you just look at our rankings and all the guys that we have as first round or second round picks at the running back position, like I'm pretty much in on all of them. The guys that I'm not in on, like Leone said, I don't want to get into a spot where I'm taking David Montgomery, Antonio Gibson, Josh Jacobs, and we can disagree about some of these guys, but I don't really take Cam Akers either. I don't really take Zeke very much, although I know Evan is in on Zeke. I think Leone's in on Cam Akers. Like, we can disagree on those guys, but like all those guys in that range there, I just don't want. I'd rather skip those guys and wait for some guys we can talk about later. So Evan, is there any, I know we've already talked about Zeke. I don't know if we've gotten your Cam Akers take lately, but is there any kind of round 3, 4, 5 running backs that you actually do find yourself taking a lot?
I mean, it's Ezekiel Elliott. It's not in the third round. I mean, I want to be clear. Like, I'm not like going out of my way to draft Zeke. But if he lasts to the 4th, and I've seen him last to the 5th, I took him in the 6th round of the Apex Experts Writers Draft or whatever, which is an extremely wide receiver heavy draft anyways. But I mean, he lasted to me like at 6'10" or something wild. But I've taken him in FFPC high stakes in like the middle of the 4th. And I would definitely take him in the 5th round. I mean, he still has a ton of touchdown upside. He did have the PCL last year. And I mean, he's definitely got the backing of ownership in Dallas. Cam Akers, never get him. And that's because I don't know if I totally believe in him still coming off the Achilles. He was so inefficient last year when he returned in the playoffs. And I like Darrell Henderson. The Rams like Darrell Henderson. I mean, I think that this is legit, that they're going to come out of the gates using quite a bit of Darrell Henderson in tandem with Cam Akers. Still a really good offense, and I understand wanting to invest in it, but I never get Cam Akers. I wanted to ask you guys specifically, and I know that this is more of like a strategy podcast, but there is a very strong reticence in some circles to Christian McCaffrey. And I mean, we all have him as our number 1 overall player, right? And I mean, I feel pretty confident about that, actually. But some people are out here saying you're an idiot if you don't have Jonathan Taylor above him. What's your reaction to that, Leone?
I mean, I think Adam puts it best. If you don't want to take CMC first overall, you're drafting with 5 condoms on. I mean, let's just get out of here with that. No, but seriously, if you take a look at it, basically, I think people are afraid of risk, whether it's perceived risk or real risk. And they see that CMC's gotten hurt the last couple of years and they don't want to take him. And Jonathan Taylor was awesome last year. But, our business is to try and look forward as much as we can and as possibly as we can. And we're seeing not only, the odds of a guy hitting, but how impactful that is to a team. Like, Jonathan Taylor had an absurd year last year, but he sort of had an unsustainable touchdown rate, likely an unsustainable yards per carry. And he still only had, 22 PPR points per game, I think it was, which historically isn't that high for the overall RB1. Whereas CMC, week in and week out, when he's healthy, he's the top projected overall running back by multiple points over other guys. And that kind of upside, if all of these running backs have risk early. So I want the big time payoff if I'm taking one early, and no one is going to pay off like CMC because he's so unique in terms of his pass catching and he still gets all the goal line touches. To me, he's the clear guy because I want that type of ceiling.
That's a great answer. I mean, I think you knocked that out of the park.
Yeah, exactly. And I think people are overconfident in their ability to predict injuries 100%. I mean, we went through the exact same thing when Evan and I were like, every podcast we talk about Will Fuller, take Will Fuller, and this was in 2020. Guy goes completely nuclear for 11 games, gets popped for the PED suspension. But still, I mean, every response to that was the same. Christian McCaffrey. How can you be high on Will Fuller? He's going to get hurt, right? People have a very, very, very overconfident in their ability to predict injuries. And so I don't see any reason Christian McCaffrey is more likely to get hurt this year than any other running back in the NFL. Anyways, I think there's some tier drop that we should talk about here, Leone. And to me, it's like after the Etienne, Javonte, James Conner, Lenny Fournette go, I think there's a tier drop there. And so like I'm trying to get at least one before that and hopefully two. Is there anybody you're targeting beyond that tier drop before we get to some of the guys that we certainly like that go in round 6, 7, 8?
Yeah. If they fall to like late 4 or 5 and you don't have a running back, or maybe you only have one, I think J.K. Dobbins and Breece Hall are the type of guys that make sense to invest in because we're investing in talent there. And Dobbins' case too, it's an offense that, he might not have the biggest of ceilings because of the lack of pass catching there, but that offense is going to put up so many fantasy points on the ground that he has a really stable floor. And I do think there's some paths where he's averaging, legitimately like 6 yards per carry with double-digit touchdowns because that offense is unique. And then Breece Hall, just a huge talent. He can do everything. And I like focusing on guys that we look at the tail end of the season when it matters a little bit more. Obviously, you have to get to the playoffs, but good chance by the end of the season, Breece Hall takes over. I mean, we see this all the time with the talented rookie running backs. It's always hard to see it before the season. And after the season, it's like, oh yeah, maybe we should have been on that.
Yeah, of course. Definitely like Breece Hall will be my favorite in there as well. I like Breece Hall more than J.K. Dobbins. I was taking a ton of J.K. Dobbins when he was in round 6 or 7, but yeah, now I definitely prefer Breece Hall. The thing about it is if we get 1 or 2 early, I feel fine skipping over that whole next group because there's guys that go 6, 7, 8, 9, and I'll point some out that I like. A.J. Dillon, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Miles Sanders, Ramondre Stevenson, Tony Pollard. And I mean, I could keep going, but like you can get those guys, especially in home leagues. I mean, you can get those guys 7, 8, 9, 10. And to me, that's like really appetizing as my running back depth. Obviously, there's going to be more injuries than other running back than other positions, and we'll be able to grind the waiver wire also. But like, I like taking 1 or 2 early and then hitting this range hard. Evan, is there any takes you have on the guys that go kind of 7, 8, 9, 10?
No, and one of the benefits of taking early running backs in a home league is that you can skip that tier, because if you take the wide receivers early, take an early tight end, like you're definitely going to end up drafting in that tier, the 7th, 8th, 9th round running backs. And the reality is, although we like those guys to an extent, each of them individually, the reality is that, like, based on historical trends, only a small percentage of those guys are really going to help you. That are really going to swing fantasy leagues and dictate the outcomes of fantasy leagues. So skipping over that tier, I think, or maybe just taking one guy from taking a shot if a guy falls past his ADP. But I think it gets really interesting. And what we're doing right now is, especially grinding the preseason and all that stuff, is like trying to find the super late round sleepers. A guy like Isaiah Pacheco, who, oh my God, we did this draft last night. And he went, what did he go, 702?
Yeah, it was preposterous.
Well, yeah, I don't know if we can call him a late round sleeper anymore.
Yeah.
But, Isaiah Spiller and this kid, Jalen Warren, who apparently has already won the Steelers' number 2 running back job. Like Najee Harris had 381 touches last year. He is at significant injury risk. Just based on his projected workload. So knowing those guys, grinding the Jalen Warrens and having him be, your new 19th round pick or 16th round pick or whatever, like, I love stashing those guys on my bench.
My take is that in that 7, 8, 9, 10 range, we can actually get like starters on good teams. And I know you can poke holes in some of them, but like CH is a starter on a really good team. Miles Sanders is a starter on a really good team. I think Ramondre, we've talked endlessly about Ramondre's upside. Tony Pollard, we know could get not a starter, but could get pass down and run down work. And of course, we know the A.J. Dillon situation as well. And then to me, like in home leagues, you don't even have to go that deep. And I totally understand what Evan's saying. I think some of those guys that are real deep are interesting. But to me, like Cordell Patterson goes super late. Damian Pierce goes super late. Brian Robinson's going to go super late. All these guys are going to go super late in home leagues. And so like, I don't have to force it with some of these super, super thin guys. I can get like actual base good backs 7, 8, 9, 10 and beyond. And so again, I like start with running back, hit wide receiver through the middle, and then come back with some running back shots late because I think there's a lot to chew on. Leone, any thoughts on later round running backs?
Yeah. Also, depending if you are starting with 2 running backs early or just one, like the value of that base work that you mentioned, some of these starting running backs changes a bit. If you've got just one running back early, you do want to focus on that sort of archetype, maybe a Devin Singletary type that you can get later. We're pretty into Michael Carter. I know that's the flip side of the Breece Hall, but if something happens to Breece Hall, Michael Carter does have upside and he's got a base role out of the gate. If you've started with 2 or 3 running backs early, though, I might wait a couple rounds longer. And at this point, you're thinking end of season upside more than anything else. So Kenneth Walker, his price is falling a lot, especially with, the hernia issue. But he's someone who's super talented, who could emerge by the end of the season. Evan mentioned Isaiah Spiller. I'm into all the rookies. Rashad White, Spiller and White are in backfields that led the NFL in high value touches for running backs last year. That's targets and goal line touches. That's really how we win at the running back position. We don't want the trap guys who are getting low value touches between the 20s, receptions, touchdowns. That's how you're going to win your league. So focusing on guys who we think have the ability to do that, either due to their skill set, due to the offense around them, regardless of what their day one role, you want to stash those. And in a managed league, you have the ability to churn through so many running backs. I did a podcast on the differences between best ball and managed, but managed, you might touch like 30 running backs over the course of the season. So like it might be a 1% chance any of them hits, but you roll through 30 of them, all of a sudden one of them hits in a big way, completely changes the landscape for your team.
Yeah, you find your Eli Mitchell of this year, you find your Rashad Penny of this year, who weren't even being discussed at all at this time last season. And so certainly grinding the waiver wire is going to be a huge part of winning at the running back position. All right, that's going to do it for our look at running back. Hope you guys enjoyed this. We'll be back next episode to talk wide receiver. For Evan, for Leone, for producer Luke, I'm Adam. Good luck, everybody.